Reconvene the regular session of the Board of County Commissioners. Today is Wednesday, August 27th, 2025. We have a couple of items left on our agenda for the week. The first one is going to be a work session on our Public Safety Task Force. It's a county administration item, and we have a various panel of folks here with us to help us out with that. It's been a long trudge and a lot of information shared. And Mr. Mokreisky, I think you want to lead this off and go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Good morning. And of course, you see we have Sheriff Wilkerson and DA Perosa that are here with us, as well as Mr. Rickoff and Gracia Brunswick, thank you, from Parole and Probation. So various staff, Chief Deputy Speldrich is here as well. So Ms. Williams is going to walk through sort of just a brief overview, because you already had this presentation. We just want to refresh a little bit. I just want to make an initial comment about the timing of this conversation, particularly given the fact, and we didn't plan it this way, but this work session is happening at the same time that the House and the Senate at the state, the House and Senate Revenue Committees are in joint session right now to hear the updated state revenue forecasts for the current biennium that begins on July 1st. And I did get a note that that number is now out, and I said, the forecast is posted, and it's officially, the state forecast, officially reducing the 25 to 27 biennium revenue by $845.7 million. The prior, previously, the state back in May, a month before the end of the 25 session, revenue available for the legislature to appropriate fell by $755 million. So we're not headed in the right direction. We say all this because you heard yesterday our policy team give a legislative update and talk about the increasingly uncertain state financial outlook, as well as the impacts of the federal government budget that was recently passed. And the effects of the federal policy are, just now starting to wash over the country, and we're trying to understand what those impacts will look like. But we do anticipate, I think I mentioned this yesterday, it's going to be 2 to 3 years of impacts, right? It's not going to be all the impacts will be felt immediately. So we're trying to understand that. I think I shared with you yesterday that we're meeting this afternoon to talk more about among the leadership team to talk about trying to quantify where we believe there will be service and program and funding impacts. We know that there will be a big impact on counties, particularly in the areas that we operate co-funded programs with the state. In partnership with state agencies. And I will say, one of the things, and certainly the Sheriff and DA and Mr. Rickoff can speak to this, the Community Corrections Act funding, we know, and Commissioner Senega, who serves as the commissioner on the Public Safety Coordinating Council, and I believe the chair of the Budget Committee for the Coordinating Council are steeped in these conversations about the significant underfunding, continued underfunding of that the state is doing to the Community Corrections Act funding. So that, Medicaid funding, questions about transportation funding, the list goes on. And so I just want to, not to add to the list of challenges you have to wrestle with, but I just want to paint that broader picture that we're going to be dealing with really in the course of the next year, likely the course of the next couple of years, some really big funding challenges that are coming both from the federal and the state government. And so it's important to keep that in context, I think, as we have conversations about new funding needs that we may seek to pursue at the local level, also understanding what the impacts from the state and federal government are going to be. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Lovell, Commissioners, Judy Williams, Chief of Staff, and I'm just going to I won't take more than 10 minutes, but I thought just giving you a brief overview and also for folks watching, kind of a recap of what folks had heard. June 24th was the last time that we came to you, and you had a presentation by the co-chairs of the task force. So just wanted to kind of do a brief overview of the work of the task force and then those recommendations that they did give to you. So as you may recall, October 2023 is where 2023 of October, the board did ask for a task force to be formed to really explore these long-term funding solutions and to give some recommendations to the county administrator. So that Start of the task force did happen back in 2023. We had gathered 11 folks, a great group of individuals. I won't walk through the process as you've heard that before, but a really diverse set of folks that bring a lot of kind of that representation of the community to this group, problem-solving folks, and they really just worked really hard from April 2024 to April 2025 to do a lot of work, analysis, evaluation, process considerations to deliver you some great recommendations. So the task force heard several presentations, and we really tried to kind of come back to the public safety system as a whole. Hearing from behavioral health, sheriff's office, the DA's office, assessment and taxation, not as common as the public safety aspect that you might consider, but again, just really trying to give a well-rounded summary of the services that we provide at the county, our revenue situation, and then the combination of how, the mechanics of how they all worked together. So a lot of work after those presentations, a lot of meetings to really try to narrow the focus. The 11 individuals trying to come together and work really hard as to where do they go from here. So after reviewing and hearing from several services, several departments and programs, knowing we had to start somewhere, the task force narrowed this down to 3 essential functions of public safety to continue to move forward. Again, having to start somewhere, but knowing the value that each of these services bring. If they could tackle all of them, I think there was definite passion to do that. And as well, this is something that was reevaluated throughout the remaining conversations. But again, to kind of narrow that focus around what the task force felt the cornerstones of public safety were, and kind of also hitting on those that are most reliant on general fund dollars. Rural Patrol, District Attorney's Office, and Adult Corrections were those top 3 elements of public safety. So again, kind of looking at how to narrow the work from our entire public safety system down to maybe 3 elements of public safety, really then asking, what is that ask? Having heard from presentations, just really trying to hone in a little bit deeper as to what does that look like. So for Rural Patrol, that is really an annual ask of around $22 million, and these were last year's costs as well, just to note that, to bring about 68 deputies on board to provide new additional service for Rural Patrol. The second aspect in the District Attorney's Office was an ask of around $5 million, and that's really the people side of things, so not infrastructure or whatnot, but both prosecution and support staff. And then that third element of adult corrections, just trying a lot of discussion around the temporary levy that we have in place. So again, these are kind of annual investments, and looking at narrowing the scope even further. Based on those 3 and the ask, this slide really kind of one builds upon each other. So kind of where do we start? Looking at some of those numbers, the task force, the $27 million was kind of that first option to tackle. And that $27 million is really built on the Rural Patrol of $22 million plus the $5 million from the DA's office combined into one. So that's the $27 million. Option 2 was really, again, building on that. So the 27 plus the temporary jail levy and bringing that up to today's needs as well. So that's the $55 million. And then the $95 million was kind of an option 3. A lot of discussion about all of these, but that was really just trying to get a ballpark estimate of what it could be to bring the sheriff's office perhaps off the general fund, and what would that number look like, as the task force had a lot of discussions around need for the entire public safety system. So if there were, if the sheriff's office was brought off of the general fund, that could bring in additional funds for other services. So a lot of discussion, and I think you heard really well said from the co-chairs on June 24th when they presented to you, not taking this task lightly. I'm just briefly skimming over this, but I don't want to minimize the work and the discussion that happened. I think, they took it very seriously with how much they could try and tackle and looking at what tools they could use to get this, to hone in on this ask, this dollar amount, but knowing that the task force really did represent a good group of our community, knowing the problems that we have with our low property tax rate versus the community feeling overtaxed at some points, really trying to look at what is the minimum. So we've tried to really hone in on option one for the task force. So kind of, again, narrowing the scope to those 3 services, exploring that a little bit more. What are we looking at and trying to tackle what some tools could be used to try and get at that $27 million ask. I won't go over all of these. I know that I will say to the task force report is part of the material in today's meeting. There's a lot more detail in there too, and it goes into great detail about a lot of the tools. So great discussions around the process to evaluate these, to kind of put all the ideas out there on the table, but what are some options that we just legally can't do? What are some of those options that might take several steps to get to, and what might stay on the list? And then ultimately, the 4 recommendations to get at the 27 million were really 4 key primary recommendations. And that first one being what they called efficiencies and prioritization, kind of feeling that there's really 4 elements of that. One, prioritizing public safety services, efficiencies, trust, and then communication. So a lot of discussion on this item, and I think kind of the key to this item was really, are there things that we could be more efficient at? Are there things that we could prioritize? Some tools were suggested around charter amendments to try and prioritize those 3, Rural Patrol, Corrections, and the DA's office in some aspect. A lot of discussion too was had around trust and the trust of the public. And so the task force really felt, the more that we could communicate and be very transparent about what we've done in the past to be more efficient, what we're doing in the currently, and just talk about it at every step of the way and share that to really build that communication with the community, build the trust before moving forward with any other bigger step as well. The second recommendation was around a payroll tax. And so, again, I'll just briefly touch, there's a lot of pros and cons that are in that report and that you've heard about before. The group did just, do some ballpark estimations, not any one particular recommendation, but I think they did throw out, if, to get an idea, 0.5% of a payroll tax, which noted that would be one of the larger payroll tax that we have seen, could get around a $45.3 million revenue to the county. So just, again, ballpark figures just to give you an idea. Lots of pros and cons with that item. The third item was around special districts, so the public safety district is another option. Again, lots of scenarios about what that could look like. There's a lot of flexibility with that. You could do a different rate for incorporated versus unincorporated. You could weave in the temporary levy into that situation as well. And then that final recommendation is the multi-layered approach. And so some of that is getting back to all of the tools that were on the board previously. There might be some items like that don't bring as much revenue in, like some of these, but tipping fee perhaps, or an event fee, or some other aspects that could bring in a smaller portion combined. And as you layer that, you're just reducing that overall ask and the overall need. So just didn't want to not consider some of those tools on the table, but really weave that into their recommendations. And then just the final slide before I turn it back over to you is just some considerations from the task force to think about before moving forward. You know, again, feeling like the task force was a good representation of the community, really wanted to hone in on a few things and we talked about communication. So really just being very purposeful and transparent around what we're looking at. If we do make a move and we are more efficient, you know, talk about that, demonstrate progress that ultimately builds that trust and understanding. Engagement was another aspect. So really, if you are moving forward, do ask. Not all aspects or tools require the voter to have a vote in one of these tools or not, but to go ahead and ask for that. Any opportunity to reduce the overall need by some of those efficiencies or multi-layered approaches to reduce that need. They wanted to highlight that. And then finally, just thinking long-term and kind of thinking systematically too. So we have a lot of short-term Band-Aids, as you very well know, and so just trying to think through what are some of those long-term solutions that can really tackle the issue that we're facing today. So a very brief summary and overall, there's a lot of information too, again, in that report for anybody paying attention or listening that wanted some additional information, but didn't want to minimize the effort and the work that the task force did. They did phenomenal work and brought you some really great recommendations, and I think as it was mentioned too, just there's not that one simple fix to hand over to you and move forward with that, but I think there's lots of options on the table. And then this is that time turning back over to you that you wanted to spend some time to digest this a little bit and talk about it amongst yourselves and perhaps give the staff back some either directions or a roadmap moving forward as we look to address the public safety aspect. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Judy. Thank you, Mr. Mokraski, for the brief. Thank you for all the public task force people that put countless and countless hours into that. Great job, Sheriff and the DA. Thank you for your input as well. We have 2 hours scheduled for the discussion, so we're not under a time deadline here. And I think it's really important that we sit here, and my goal as the board chair to be leaving this space is to have a definite roadmap for you guys ahead so that we can make some incremental steps to not only earn back the public's trust, but to have a goal before us rather than just another meeting scheduled. So that's my hope. And so I'm hoping that the sheriff and the DA and those folks that have some thoughts about that could weigh in. And I also know that the board chair, is it Courtney, are we the board chair or the board vice chair? For the public safety? Co-chair, yeah, the co-chair. I want to get that right. So Courtney is with us as well, so if she doesn't mind, she's also available to answer some questions and weigh input. So I'll start with the board if you have any questions or comments, or maybe we should let the sheriff and the DA weigh in just a little bit. Would that be, I think that would be good too. Would you mind do that?
Before I do, I want to ask Courtney if she wanted to add anything else to what Judy had to say.
And Courtney, please, if you want to come to the table, please go ahead. That way we can make sure you're on the record and all that. If you don't mind, I would love to have you at the table.
I don't have I won't say much because I wasn't planning to, other than we just, Faye and I had talked about it. We knew you were having this meeting and we care deeply about the work. I think we all came to the end of that process and we wish we could have done more. And so we know it's evolving, and maybe the way we as a committee do more is we just stay present. It's our community. And so we do care about the outcome. So if we're not here today to influence other than to just stay attached and relevant and useful in this space as you do the hard work. So appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair,
Well,
go ahead, please.
Chair, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said we need to make a roadmap. I think the committee did a great job of giving you some good advice. But I don't think what we had from them was a step A, step B, step C. I will say that as the Sheriff of Lane County, I believe, as I believe our community and the task force indicated is that public safety is a cornerstone of government. They gave us the priorities on which they, as a very diverse group of people, said we need to focus on, which is road patrol, corrections, and DA's office. And I think that they, made some really good advice about you need to show that you're prioritizing public safety. You need to show that you're using your little resources to say, hey, this is part of an essential function of government, and we need to fund this first. And I think that we probably need to make a roadmap of what it is we're going to do to prove to the community that we're using the resources correctly, we're prioritizing the resources for public safety, to continue to develop that public trust so that when we get to maybe the C on the list, which is considering a payroll tax or something else that we've already kind of gotten some community buy-in. I think that we need to start planning on community education sessions. And I'll just leave it at that until specific questions happen, and I'll turn it over to the DA.
I agree with the sheriff entirely. My objective, one of my primary objectives as DA, is ultimately to increase the size of my staff. The reality for us has been, and many of you have heard me say this before, but I'll say it again, we have 24 criminal division prosecutors. That's one less than we had in the mid-1980s when we had 40% lower population. We have some of the highest caseloads per prosecutor in the state and well above national averages. And as a result of that, it's hard to be a prosecutor in the district attorney's office in Lane County and not feel like we are not doing an adequate job for our community and for victims. And so what I hope to do is ultimately add prosecutors to get us closer to statewide and national averages for a prosecutor's office in a jurisdiction this size. It will lead to prosecutors having the time they actually need to fully process the cases that they're being asked to handle. And hopefully lead to better outcomes in that they'll have adequate time to determine whether or not the people that they are prosecuting in fact should be prosecuted. Oftentimes they are not at this point having the requisite time to go through body cams and other pieces of evidence that exist within modern cases in a criminal setting to fully be able to evaluate those cases in an appropriate way and an ethical way. Instead, we're simply triaging up there, and triaging, from my perspective, could lead to very bad outcomes. And so it's my commitment to ultimately see us get to a point where my staff members have the time to be able to fully digest the information that's being provided by very capable law enforcement agencies and churn out good product and good prosecutions that this community can be proud of.
Great, thank you very much. Vice Chair.
I was gonna say, what about corrections? I see you're not at the table, but I was.
Maybe we should invite you to the table, Mr. Rico.
So we can hear
Come
you
on,
on the record.
yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. I appreciated the connection to the systems focus, the hydraulics, that this really is an interdependent system, and we need every piece of that. Our fate is similar to that of the DA's office and the sheriff's office. The county to the north of us and the county to the south of us have caseloads of about 45 clients per PO. We're double those numbers, and we're not moving in a positive direction. With this latest funding tranche coming out of the state, we will have even larger caseloads, and we cannot do the quality work that we want to do and that our community deserves when officers have no time to really get engaged and do the quality work that they want to do. So our picture's a little bit different, of course, because this is supposed to be a state function funded by the state. I appreciate the focus of the task force looking at what is fully within the county's scope and control for the solution. Our promise is kind of one step off with, should we come up with a fiscal solution that then should free up some of the grant and aid dollars to be reallocated back to parole and probation. So it's, the mechanics for our office looks a bit different, but our future is inextricably tied to whatever solutions we can come up with here. So we are very attentive and want to be absolutely part of the solution as we continue to stay creative and inventive with our mental health program, with our Justice Involved Women's program. We're doing some exceptional work under exhausting circumstances. So we're handing you part of the problem, and thankfully we had the task force to help with some of the solutions.
I will reserve my comments. They'll be brief when I make them. I actually wonder if our vice chair, who sits on the Public Safety Coordinating Council, which has more of a 360 view and has really been diving in, wants to offer anything up about what substantive conversations have been happening there since we brought parole and probation to the table, even though that's not part of the focus of the report. We haven't talked about youth services either. But the PSCC kind of holds all of it and has folks from throughout the system. So I would love to hear, we haven't really heard much of a report of what's the conversations and the challenges that are being considered there and how much this task force's work has had some crossover. So I would love to hear, if I don't want to put the vice chair on the spot, but I'd love to hear from that body through you about this issue.
Well, that's why I brought offered Mr. Rickoff to come to the table, because what I was thinking when I was watching all this was the hydraulics that was spoken of. I mean, that's what we always talk about is funding. It works its way all the way down, and it's kind of dismal, but it's a much bigger problem than what we're talking about right here, because we haven't even really got into reentry. We haven't even got into sponsors and what they're looking like and what their backlog is. We had some interesting conversations with the state a couple weeks back, and I don't know, is it any of us left the table satisfied with the answers that we were receiving? As far as there was, I wouldn't say finger pointing, but there was questions on how we're doing some of the work we do, and that's really hard to listen to when you have people around the table that are as passionate about the work they're doing. So we have more conversations to have about the budget there, and I don't know, it's tough when you have the experts sitting right here. I mean, these are the people that know the systems better than any of us, so we rely heavily on them.
Please, go ahead, Commissioner Bell. Go ahead.
I want to say a quick summation of the conversation with the state is the state encouraged us to ignore the needs of our clients on supervision and really focus solely on the risks. And it's difficult when the state in one hand is saying, do this deflection thing and really focus on individuals' needs and meet those needs so they don't become part of the public safety program. And then with the other hand says, just focus on the risks. Everybody in the state gets the public safety checklist. It looks at when one was first convicted of a crime and how many crimes they've had convictions with. That can work in a lot of counties. That particular assessment does not work in Lane County. And so we were basically facing criticism for participating in a larger risk needs assessment that gives us a full picture so we can understand the threat to the community as well as the needs of the individual so that we can best serve them. But it was literally turn a blind eye to what you know to be best practices, focus on this, and then just don't supervise folks as much as you think they need to be supervised.
So reduce risk without meeting needs. Is that what we're basically being told to do?
In Word, that's a fairly good summation.
If I
Or worry about the numbers?
may I add to
Please,
that,
go ahead.
Please, Sheriff.
The state is ignoring the fact that we had many years of
Right.
no corrections and no beds, so therefore people were, getting into their criminal lifestyles and racking up 10, 15 cases before they're getting prosecuted.
Right.
And then once they finally, met that threshold where they were getting prosecuted, they were getting a significant amount of time. However, with that, it ignores the fact that the criminality was there and progressively getting worse because there was no intervention in the in-between time. So in some counties that already had acceptable levels of patrol coverage, prosecution, and jail beds, that formula works great. But where we had a history of not providing basic services, we got out of whack, and and we're just it's chipping away to get back into the realm of normalcy, and then here we are at today's crisis. So.
Thank you, Sheriff.
It's just like our healthcare crisis. Longer.
Commissioner Buck, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to start out with some thoughts as I've been thinking about this since our last meeting. So we've been presented with this report, and although we may have, desire to do certain things in the report, it's really up to the community, right? It's going to be what they feel they want to do, and the educational piece, as was mentioned, to provide some kind of movement and direction forward. I see two really parallel paths going forward. One, engaging the community in a very somewhat similar way that we did with the Lane Event Center that we talked about yesterday, with a consultant to get out there and educate the community about what's being presented in the report, educate the community about where we are in this particular crisis, and get their feedback so we know what their temperature is and of options available to us, what would they like to see happen in their community. I think that will take some time, and I think the faster we get on that, the sooner we'll get a better understanding of what we should present in the future, especially if we need to go out and put something on a ballot for their approval. So I see that as a path that we need to go down relatively soon in order to solicit the feedback that we eventually need. But the parallel path is really having these kinds of ongoing conversations at a pretty regular pace. Previously, I had mentioned a monthly pace. We were going to discuss that today, so I'm absolutely open to whatever you all think. But there is an urgency here, especially as we're facing potential additional cuts to the departments. This was meant to add resources, but what I'm projecting is that we need to save current resources along the way somehow. This is not a short-term fix, and it's as was presented by our co-chairs, it's not a systemic fix. It really sits at the state level. But we want to move forward nevertheless. So I would like to propose to the group that we provide some kind of direction for community engagement. And I hear the sheriff loud and clear that what would be helpful is some kind of roadmap, some kind of timeline of where we want to progress and how far we want to progress at certain increments. And all that for me is up in the air, and I'd love to get the feedback from all of you. But at this point, unless we pick up the pace a little bit and work with our partners while community engagement is going on, I think we'll eventually get to where we want to be. I find those two parallel paths really important to move this along at some kind of relatively quicker pace. In the meantime, it's unfortunate, but we are going to have to probably discuss what it means with these budget deficits at the state level.
Commissioner Farr.
Thanks. I'm going to be a bit more elemental than that. Sheriff, we have a history of not providing basic services. That goes back a long way. You know, years and years ago, we had a lot more money than we have. That's not an excuse for the way we are today, because it was a gradual approach. It's equivalent to turning up the heat gradually. So you don't even notice the heat's getting turned up until you get to a certain point where the water's boiling. Well, the water's boiling. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm more guilty than just about anyone in this room, because I've been here longer, accepting the heat being turned up. And we're at a point right now where we can't allow that any further. We have to, as a Board of Commissioners, take bold steps beginning today. Bold steps. Outrageous steps. Some may view the steps that we need to take as, to make sure that we not only stop the heat from being turned up. And I'm going to quit with that metaphor, Carl, because you've been there from the beginning. You saw what it was like before, and you saw the gradual changes in your department. And Chris, you've been there a long time. You've seen the gradual changes in your department, and you know that it is unacceptable. And we're at a point in time where we simply, as a Board of County Commissioners, have to be bold about it. Not just simply prescribe a path, but be the ones to walk down that path with our chins first. And this is the time to do it. I hope that this meeting is a beginning of that direction, a beginning of informing the public what we are going to do, and we're going to do it unilaterally, we're going to do it boldly, we're going to do it strongly, and we're going to do it with all the resources we can possibly put into it to begin to solve the issue that we've gradually accepted. We've accepted it. And I'm going to point out, I'm looking in the mirror here. I'm not looking around the table. I'm looking in the mirror of the blame.
I think I'm in total agreement with Commissioner Buck, if I can say that. And picking up the pace a little bit was very eloquently saying, let's, not get our butt in gear kind of thing. I think that's a great statement, and I think that's what we all should be focusing on. I think I have a little rub with the consultant and doing that kind of whole process, because I think it's going to take too much time, honestly, and I don't know if there's another way governmentally to do that. I mean, obviously I'm still new here to the governmental process, and to me it seems like we need to take, as Commissioner Farr said, bold steps, even outrageous steps today. I want to bring just a couple of thoughts so I can tell you where my mind is here, is that in the slides there's a few quotes that came out, and we have no new revenue, only changes in how existing dollars circulate. That was in the fine print on one of those slides. And so that's the truth and reality that we have here. We're not going to produce any new revenue today. We're not going to solve the problem by saying, oh, we're going to do this. So the hard issue is before us, is the elephant in the room, is what are we going to cut? And how are we going to communicate those cuts to the public? As Commissioner Buck had said too, we need to educate the public. So how do we do that in a very forward-thinking, immediate sort of way, in my opinion? Economic growth is the core to the long-term solution, but right now Oregon is 39th in economic growth in the country. We're not attracting new businesses there, so now we're going to have to do something even more dramatic if we're not attracting new business and new taxation to our area. And then, as Commissioner Buck so said too, we need to ask the voters and the employers and everyone else that's involved with this what their weighing is. So perhaps maybe we might think of this in light of Commissioner Farr's comments about doing something radical. Is there a temperature in this room with my colleagues of doing 5 independent town hall meetings in each district? To say, look, here's where we're at, this is what we've got, here's the slides, this is what we're presenting to you, because we don't have a newspaper, really, that's a published print that in our day you used to look through in the morning to educate you really what's going on. But we're going to have to aggressively go out into the community on our own accord, out into these 5 districts and speak these issues to people and educate them on it and get immediate feedback, so that we're not relying on a consultant in 6 months and a year later. This is what my concern is. And so what the immediate steps we need to fund, in my opinion, is we need to find a way to keep our rural patrol on staff for the next couple of years. And I also believe we need to throw a bone to the district attorney's office to at least upstaff a few positions to relieve some of that pressure immediately. And so what does that mean? Is that $22 million? What's the number on that? Because if we don't have a defined goal of what the number is, we're just gonna vacillate on conversation. So let's say, just for throwing it out there, originally it's $27 million, but let's say our goal is half of that, $13 million. So we're gonna, on the table today, we're gonna decide to purposely put forward a plan of attack of cutting what we think we can cut to raise $13 million and take that plan out into these 5 rural and urban district town hall meetings and say, this is where we're at, people. What do you think? There may be a lot of programs in there that I've got my heart set on too that may have to cut. But, as a businessman growing up in this era, there's times where you just gotta cut some stuff because you can't. And you can't keep bleeding yourself dry because you'll fail in the end. And I don't want us to fail on any level. But at this point, the highest priority in my purview is we need to keep our citizens safe. And if we're continually eroding the safety of our citizens, that's one of the things I just can't sleep at night with. So might I suggest that we look for something that is dramatic and immediate so that we can use this path forward of efficiency and prioritization. Let's say we just tackle that one right now. We propose to the community that this is the way we can be most efficient, even though it's going to hurt. And we're telling the community that our main priority is public safety. And we're proving that by coming out to them and telling them this is the hard decisions we want you to help us make. Commissioner?
Well, I'll respond to that. We see a precedent of governments going out and saying, we're going to cut all this unless you do this. We saw that just recently with the city of Eugene with their budget deficits. And I worry about people looking and seeing a disingenuity in that, in making threats to cut the things that they love unless they give us more. I think that I see the value in telling people how much we need. But if the cuts in services that you're discussing, that you're talking about, dismantle infrastructure that would be very difficult to replace, I think we have to consider very closely how we talk about cutting services before we go to the recommendations from the task force, which is. You're talking about efficiency and prioritization, the left hand. I think that moving forward, we have to make certain that the public understands where we are right now. Now, if somebody looks at me in the eye and says, I need to get you to understand something, I say, I already understand that. And generally, people will say, I already understand. But we're seeing things with the report from the task force, and because of the things that we're seeing in our community, hearing from Chris Para about not being able to prosecute people who should be prosecuted to keep other people safe, hearing from Sheriff Wilkerson about rural patrol that we're not able to provide. People need a clearer picture of that. So I do agree with going out into all 5 districts, not unlike what Tom Turner and Carrie Carver did in 2011 and 2012. They went into every district, and I sat and watched in Oak Ridge and different places how well received they were because they were trusted. When Carl goes out, and when Chris goes out, and when Tom goes out, you're all going to be trusted, And I think that that is a really important element of moving forward right now, is make sure that we garner the trust of the people who we need to have support the bold steps that we have to take. And who better to do it, and where better to do it than in all 5 commission districts are in Eugene. All 5 commissions can be from Eugene. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about for the far stretches of the county, to make sure that people understand that beyond where the EPD and the Springfield Police Department are, that public safety is affecting everybody's life here. And I really support that. I worry a little bit about suggesting cuts that we don't really think that we would make. And I suspect that's not exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about cuts that we would make, $13.5 million worth of cuts in essential services, what have been deemed to be essential services that people would in fact miss. But so my point is that I would like, yes, I agree with going out into the community. I'd like, can we start tomorrow, But be careful about how we make the presentation to the people, because we have to garner trust. We can't try to instill fear without getting the trust first.
Yeah, Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. Yeah, a little bit of a few pieces from all the things. Pulling us back up to the top of the presentation, all of us in this room understand the need and the problem and how it's structural and systemic, what the impacts to community are on having inadequate public safety. I absolutely understand the problem with the deficit in rural patrol, but the DA's office function, I think, is something that is also really important to help the community understand the victims advocacy work that happens there knows no district boundary. And it's not about whether you're serviced by a city, a municipal law enforcement entity, or you're in the county, you're you're tens of miles away or right in the heart of a city. So there's still a lot more that we all understand that the general public maybe doesn't. There's also a lot of responsibilities that we have and pieces that we understand around the impacts on the county's overall fiscal health to whether these services are adequately funded. I think every single one of us can and does talk clearly with folks in the community about this county's priority on public safety, and we can demonstrate that we have that when you look at our strategic plan, when you look at the percentage of the general fund that we dedicate to these services, and in many other ways. So we all understand all of that, but what we don't understand is what is the public's understanding of that, of all the parts and pieces. We might know some of the public who are vocal or who talk to us, but we don't as a whole know what that looks like, and that's what we need to get at. And that requires some work. It requires, whether that's polling or more community work. I completely agree. Each one of us should be out in our districts. I know I am. I think all of us are out in our districts talking about these issues. But if we're going to do it pointed in a direction of a solution, we need to do the work to have a unified message about what that solution is and how we arrive at it and what the trade-offs might be. We need to be unified in what those tactics are. We have to have a strategy. We have to, yes, we can be bold or outrageous or radical or whatever the words are, but we still have to be thoughtful and responsible and strategic. So I think what you're offering, Chair, is the right tactical approach, but we're not ready to use that tactic, or it could potentially do more damage and backfire. I think we have proven success with a model like was mentioned by others, the Lane Event Center planning, right? We got a report back that gave us a clear sense of a vetted community vision for what that facility, what that campus could look like. We need that for our public safety system as well. We did it with the Parks Levy. We identified gaps in the system, and then we engaged someone who's a professional at getting community input, at messaging, at doing some polling to help with that messaging, and then we had the tools to go out and run a successful levy campaign. And we've done that with the public safety levy in the past. So we already know that that is the model that works. What I'm hearing is a sense of urgency that's even greater than we've heard in the past around the event center, around the Parks Levy, around the public safety levy in the past. So I think we have a roadmap that is essentially the recommendation before us, which is to ask the administrator to assemble the right team and maybe engage a consultant to start doing some of that temperature read, what's the right messaging, so that we have even better tools to go with our understanding, to go out in the community and help be part of bringing folks along. So I am fully in support of that recommendation, as I am of the adding a little extra urgency to the process than we might otherwise.
Sorry, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah. So I keep thinking back at the jail levy, because that was, we did, I don't know how many the sheriff and I did in our district.
There's 57 total.
57 total?
47.
47 total, yeah. So I made everyone in my district but one of them, and Tom was at a bunch of them also. And I think the messaging has to be so crisp and clean that this is what we can do, because we had a pretty simple message there that day after day after day at these meetings. and it's hard to get the message out what's really happening, because people thought that was going to bring more rural patrol, right? This is just for jail beds. So then you had to start the whole argument again, well, this isn't going to help patrol. No, this is just for jail beds. So, I mean, that was a pretty simple levy. I mean, it was a lot of work, but it was a simple message to get across. So I agree that our language and what we are going to do needs to be concise, and we all have to say the exact same message. And I'll spend every night in the district relaying that message to anybody that'll listen. And I think that's what we're going to have to do to get this thing across. But we need to sit here with all the experts in the room and figure out what that message is.
Commissioner Buck.
I appreciate you mentioning that. I think the levy does give us a lot of lessons learned on how to engage with the public. I do also agree that we all need to be out in our communities, but one town hall in my district is one neighborhood in my district is really not enough. And town halls, depending on how you run them, aren't always constructive engagement, but nevertheless could be utilized in this circumstance. But they must be like really thoughtful and authentic, and I think that's what came across when we did all those for the levy. I think I would really like to ask the DA and the sheriff, what kind of community engagement do you think is going to be necessary from your perspective in order to, move the needle forward with the items listed in the report? I mean, the one that comes to my mind that I think is really specific that we need to ask the public is, what would you think about a Lane County-wide public safety district and how that would potentially change the game in the future, or how that would interact with the levy? That's just one aspect of the thing in the report that's presented, but you are engaged with the public all the time. So knowing that, how would you like to proceed with public engagement?
We may have very different answers to this. The reality from the district attorney's perspective is the community largely does not understand what a district attorney's office does. And we are responsible at some level for that, because what we've done throughout the years is largely hide in the shadows and do the work that we are commanded to do by state law. I'm hoping to change that, and one of the ways to do that is to ultimately go out to the four corners of Lane County and begin to have conversations about what a district attorney's office really does, and in so doing, talking about the resources I have and the limitations on those resources, not to provide excuse for what many of our community members think are shortcomings from my office, but ultimately to at least provide some additional explanation to them about why we do the things we do. And frankly, from a district attorney, I think they have a better understanding of what a sheriff does, in the sense that he runs a jail, he has patrol officers that are out in our community keeping people safe. I need to do a better job. I need to be in meetings all across Lane County, ultimately talking to people to explain what it is we do. And so my hope, or what I'd like to do, is participate in any meeting where anyone will have me to begin to have conversations and answer the tough questions that community members have about not only my office, but the criminal justice system as a whole, and what they see as either shortcomings or great successes within that system. I think that'll build some trust with community members as they hear candid answers to questions that they might not understand. And hopefully we will begin to get our message of resource limitation out there as we begin to have those conversations. So I'm willing to go wherever they'll have me, frankly, to have these conversations.
I'm similar, but I want to go backwards for a second though, and remind everybody in here that we are one of the least patrol counties in the United States. We have 30 main office patrol deputies, which equates to 3 deputies and a sergeant at any given time to go from Florence to Oak Ridge to Cottage Grove. So what I would like to say is that I already was hemorrhaging staff this year because of burnout and workload. And that will only get worse if we have any kind of reduction. So I want to say that, or remind everybody that we did polling before the last levy. And that polling said, you may get this passed. You may get this passed if you do a lot of community engagement. Well, we did the community engagement and we had one of the highest pass ratings of any levy ever in Linn County. So I agree with a lot of the statements that were made in here about we need to engage the community, we need to find out. I think we need to kind of be on the same, as much as my wife's gonna hate this, the same pace that we were for the last levy on meeting with the community, because they need to hear the needs. There's confusion every day about what resources are available. When we're getting people complaining about, people speeding on their roadway, but we can't respond to their domestic violence call, there's confusion on what resources are available. So we have to do the same pace, same kind of education campaign that we've done previously. It's proven to be successful. I know it takes a lot of work and it'll be a lot of my time, but we have to do that while maintaining at least what we have. We can't go backwards. I cannot lose any more staff. Their safety, the community safety, all of it is, and during the budget presentation, we talked about what that equated to lost dollars to Linn County and just what we put into training and into the 8 people that went to other agencies, because they said, look, I can make more and do less. And I can't argue with that. So we have to have what we have, and we have to do the pace of the education campaign and really go out there. And like Chris said, I'm committed to going to anywhere at any time to anybody who will listen to me. So, but I think that has to be the first step as we continue to make our roadmap of what goes next.
Okay, Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you for that, Sheriff and DA. Yes, about the levy, one of the really important differences to remember is we were asking people to maintain a status quo. This may be asking people to do more, and that is very different. So again, more education and understanding is necessary to bring them on board. One of the other pieces of engagement we need to do, I know this matters to you, Chair, is to not skip cross-jurisdictional conversations, because every jurisdiction is facing what we're facing. And we don't want to get over our skis on something that we're going to ask of everyone in the county when other jurisdictions might be asking their constituents. So it's not that we have to get permission from other jurisdictions, but we have to do a good job of communicating as we go, what we're thinking, hear what they're thinking, understand. Again, that's just being strategic. We can't skip steps. We have to do all the steps. We just have to do them more quickly than we often have, but we can't skip steps. We've got to have a plan. And yes, the public safety levy passed with the highest percentage of support, largely because of that outreach, not only to the rural community who understands the need, but to the urban centers. We have to stop thinking about districts and boundaries and understand the county as an entire community, and that the public safety system serves and benefits that entire community. If the folks in the urban centers don't understand the system and are brought in to think of this as a collective responsibility for safety, and I think some of the opportunities to do that are to talk about services of the DA's office, for example. Then if we're talking about something that the voters are going to decide on, the numbers just aren't there unless you bring along the urban voters. That's where the density and the turnout, I'm just talking tactically and strategically, that's how this works. So we, as a board, have got to be unified about how this lifts up the entire county. Because folks are, if we portray a sort of tribal mindset about our districts, we are not helping this county, period, full stop, but especially in this regard. And I take that very seriously. Sheriff knows that, DA knows that, a previous sheriff knows that. put myself out there and talk to my district about why public safety funding matters. And it's not always a comfortable and easy place to be in, but it helps bring people along because folks don't always understand what the work of the totality of the work of this county when it comes to public safety. So I think every single one of us puts ourselves out there to do that, and we all face a different kind of response based on our district, so we have to have an awareness of that. And that's why I'm still supportive of engaging someone to do broad brushstrokes, message testing and polling, so that we develop a unified message that works everywhere, and then each of us tailors how we deliver it and to whom based on our district, not what we're saying. Thank you, Chair.
I got a question, I think, for the administrator, more specifically on this. If we were able to go out and do community engagement, how would you envision that to roll out? Like, how would we put together something? And I mean, an RFP would likely go out for some. We don't have the capacity internally, is what I'm trying to get at. That we would need to have some outside firm assist us in that. And so how would you put that together or propose that for us?
The community engagement piece in
Piece,
particular, you know, prior efforts, I think there's probably a debate about whether or not you do some survey work first and then begin the outreach, or you do some outreach first and then do some, you know, we could probably debate that point, but we have done in certain circumstances, and I'm looking both at Judy and Greg, we hired I'm trying to remember what that, where we hired a consultant to do like community engagement. I thought it was related to Lane Event Center, and it may have been for the stadium project actually. That early on in that effort, what was the name of that firm? Do you remember? Yeah. So we can, you know, if the board wants to engage with polling work is going to require an outside entity to conduct, right, to do a scientific related poll. If you want information from voters on what their sentiments are as a sort of starting point, that's a pretty typical starting point. And then we can work with folks that we've worked with before or others to do community outreach. I think, you know, there's a couple pieces of that story. You heard the DA and the sheriff talk about, we need to tell the story about the current state and the why of the current state, and then do some listening. I think what has not worked really well, in my experience, is to go out and say, here's the solution, please support it, right? There has to be this, which does require some time, right? To go out and say, here are the challenges we're facing, here's what the task force, we engage this task force, here's what they're recommending, what are your thoughts? Get some feedback, maybe then do some polling, and then start to dial in, you know, a specific recommendation or plan or path. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think, you know, what's difficult about that process is it's really lengthy. It takes a long time, right, to do, because we have a big county. You have to get out to a lot of different areas. So, I mean, I do think it makes some sense to do some of that outreach. And I will say, we're going to struggle to have the staff capacity to manage all of that. That will be really difficult at the scale that I think we're talking about.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because if we just have a couple of people at the office do it, I'm concerned that the pace would be longer. But if we're able to engage an outside entity that has a team, perhaps they could do it quicker, but they can propose that to us and propose different timelines for what kind of engagement we're interested in, and we could decide at that point. I'm just really advocating that we definitely do the public engagement piece. Without that, I think if we try to do too much too fast, we might get some backlash. And I feel like that happened when we tried to do the Justice Center, and the timeline was too quick, and we didn't get to engage the full community on the need. But not to lose sight that I think there's work that our body together can do while that's happening, so that we're not losing time.
Mr. McCroskey, when you said that it's a lengthy process, just for the public, what are we talking? Months, a year? What do we, I mean, just
Well,
put a number on it.
the
Good.
question is what you, from when to when? I mean, I will offer that what I was recalling actually was the courthouse process.
Yeah.
So we had, and one suggestion for the board would be, you could ask us to dust off what that process looked like. Just from the standpoint, it was a pretty robust, right? We did a lot of work around like planning and design, and then we did a lot of initial outreach around kind of what, we did some, I don't know if we call them design charrettes, but we did some sort of focus groups and community engagement where residents were able to, so this was a facility development, so a different conversation, but we engaged the community in various ways to provide input on, in that case, the design of a facility. And then we engaged, went out, we did polling and surveying and everything, and we landed on a number, and then we went out and we did outreach. And I will say the outreach on the sort of the camp, that was a campaign effort, was it 2018?
Yes.
I think 2018. That was largely, it was the sheriff, former DA, presiding judge, several commissioners, and myself that would all sort of go out and speak to different groups. So that would be, that's the most recent example of when we talk about a community conversation related to new revenue for public safety related service that's countywide. That would be the best, most recent example that we have. Other than the levy, which we've done the renewals, but I think the levy is a different conversation because the original conversation, which is the big lift, was in 2013. It's a long time ago. And then the renewals, it's largely the sheriff and the sheriff's office and youth services that are leading those conversations.
Ms. Judy, go ahead, you're next.
Go ahead if it's pertaining
What
to
was,
this item.
what was the Parks levy timeline? Because another thing I'm thinking about that we have, and thank you, Courtney, for volunteering the rest of your task force members that you're here to help keep this work on track and going. So we also have another group that we haven't had with the Justice Center, the courthouse, with the levy renewal. But we did have with the Parks Task Force was we had a Parks Advisory. So we also have some other ready-made sort of ambassadors out to the community that if we get some good messaging can be part of helping spread that good word. But what was the timeline for the Parks levy? Because that's the most recent brand new funding ask we've made.
I mean,
Where
a
we've
solid
been through a
year.
process.
A solid year really is to, particularly I would say for something like we're talking about here. The Parks levy, I would argue, was a little bit more narrow and focused, right? We developed this project, and I don't mean that there wasn't a
But it
big
was all the
effort.
same
There was.
steps that we're talking about.
Absolutely,
That's
yeah.
what I'm
So
talking
I would
about.
say about at least a year.
Yeah.
Just for that, once you sort of decide what the plan is. So we're at the stage now where you have a task force that engage and provided you some parameters to sort of pursue, but there's a lot of additional steps and work that has to happen to sort of figure out what are you going to go with. And I would offer just the conversation about budget reductions, because that was something that the task force talks about, efficiencies and public trust along with new revenue. And one of the things I talked a lot to the task force is, and I think we all said, we're not going to cut our way into a solution. And I think we do have to talk about, there is a public trust element around what is the county doing to effectively and efficiently use the resources we have today. So we need to keep, just as the DA talked about, communicating the value and the challenges that they're facing. We need to talk about what we've been doing as a government for decades to reduce. But the fundamental problem that this problem we're trying to solve is not related to expenses. Right, that we have growth in. The problem we're dealing with is a revenue problem. It's that our base revenue is, and no one disputes that, our base revenue is far less than it should be. So I'm just I mean, we can have it, we're gonna have the conversation about budget cuts. We're gonna, whether or not it's about funding this or not. We're gonna have that in the next few months. So we're gonna be presenting to you, and I'm gonna be looking for more clear direction going into next year around how to solve these challenges, because they're much greater. So I do think that we need, and this is what the task force said, is you need to work on the trust element. You need to go and tell the story. You need to demonstrate that you're doing everything you can to spend all the dollars you have the most effectively and efficiently possible. So that needs to be part of the equation. And I think that's part of this community outreach effort.
I was just going to briefly add, I think, a lot, like the alignment aspect that you brought up too, like, can we start with the community engagement, and can we also do the monthly follow-up and checks to get the pace going and started? I think too, with community engagement, there's at least two paths too. I think, it does take time to do an RFP, it does take time to pull that together, but I think when we've seen the successes happen with levies, with that collaborative effort, it's trying to identify what's the best structure internally here, who's the group of folks that we need at the table to at least, there's a lot of logistics too to figure out, if we are going out, what does that look like, and who's speaking, and what are we talking about, while also doing an RFP perhaps. I think there is that balance of, we want to get moving forward too, and staff does want to do their best to take an effort and move it forward while also being realistic about timing and resources. So I think there's some pathways to continue moving it forward while we seek, but I think that internal group work, I think, is key that we could get started on quicker.
Well, Western.
Your comment about trust is just nailed down. I think part of the reason the jail levy did go over was the audit. I mean, that's a huge part of that, just looking at those numbers, and this is what we're doing with those dollars. So, I mean, I think we've talked enough about we need to be on the same message, and there's no districts when it comes to the county safety funding. But I think one thing we're going to have to just absolutely nail down and do everything we can is that every nickel we are getting is being spent as efficiently as we can, because we are going to run up against that. I mean, we do with everywhere we go. So part of that message, and then we're going to get asked again, well, we just passed the jail levy. Now you're asking for more. And so these, I think, an RFP to try and help us all understand maybe the best message that covers every district that we have is going to be crucial in this.
Absolutely, and the part you say about that every nickel is spent efficiently. The initial levy, we over levied. And the day that Byron Trapp sat there and said we're not going to levy every dollar that we asked for, the amount of trust that is built by not taking everything, by just taking what you need, that was an amazing foundation for the future passage of the levy. I believe when we didn't spend the money because we didn't have the need to spend the money, there's a tremendous trust building. So getting the message out to the far reaches of Lane County, but just as important is the messenger. And who is the best messenger to deliver what is a very concise, accurate, trustworthy, and verifiable message? And I'm looking at the messengers right here. The people who are really trusted and demonstrated that they have been trusted over and over again by the community. And Judy, you gave us a slide, conditions for moving forward. I have that slide right here. Demonstrate fiscal responsibility and prioritization, coordinate with other jurisdictions, reduce the overall ask, long-term strategies, etc. I think getting that message together for the messengers to deliver in a way that people trust every single word that you say, as they have demonstrated by the levy itself getting more and more yes votes every single time. I think the direction we need to go is to go to the people of Lane County and give them a clear, concise, trustworthy message of what the actual picture is. Because I'm looking at the polling that took place in 2023, and pull it up really quickly right here. 2/3 of the people, it's Patinkin Research Strategies. 2/3 of the people think we're adequately funded in public safety, or they don't know. Only 1/3 of the people say actually 35% of the people said that we're either underfunded or grossly underfunded. So clearly, the message has got to be put forward in a way that people understand and trust. Because the fact is, there's talk about what is the truth and what isn't the truth. Facts are the truth, and the fact is we are underfunded, grossly underfunded, and you can demonstrate it with your offices of the workload that each of your attorneys has. Carl, you can demonstrate it with the calls for service that you don't respond to. It's easily verifiable. So I think you're spot on with it. Demonstrate that we are spending the money efficiently, and that the messenger is the one that's trustworthy, and demonstrably so. I think we're kind of consolidating on the fact that we need to go out to the people and give a set of information that is trustworthy, understandable, and verifiable.
I would add to that, I think that's excellent, and just add to that this report then provides options in response as solutions, and get that feedback as to which options people are interested in. We're not going to satisfy everybody, we know that already. Oh.
That was a nice punctuation to that statement, wasn't it?
Thor, is that you?
I did want to ask the sheriff a little bit more on your idea of a roadmap. What do you envision that to be? We've talked a lot about community engagement, but I think you had this concept of a roadmap that I'd like to hear a little bit more about.
Well, ultimately, I think this body needs to decide, and I'm not saying for that to be today, but decide what is it that we're ultimately thinking we're going to go ask the community. My vision of that is that we will ask for some level of, whether that's a district or a payroll tax or something, and we'll have a presentation to say, if you do this, we will provide you this, and in the same fashion that we did with the levy. That was very definitive. 255 jail beds, X number of beds going to youth services, audit every year. It needs to be a very definitive thing. I also believe that we can't ask anything of the citizens without giving them something back. I think that the corrections has to be rolled into it, and because people are going to say, oh, you're just taking, and we will be able to say, well, we are asking for more, but this other funding source is going to go away. It'll now become all-inclusive. So to answer your question is, I think we need to decide what is the ultimate goal so that we can make those progressive steps down the path of what are we going to go have these community conversations about. What are we going to tell them? I mean, we need to educate them on what our services currently are and why it is that we're not responding to, speeding vehicle complaints, and remind them the things that we tell you every budget session, that, we are one of the worst counties when it comes to traffic safety, and we have a crisis going with, fatal crashes in Lane County, and all of these things that people forget because they're living their daily lives. They're just trying to put food on their table, and they think that, and they pay a lot of taxes already. We need to remind them why this is important. So we need to decide what the ultimate goal is, and then the steps to get there. And I think the urgency and the communication with the community is absolutely important. Maintaining what we have is absolutely important for the short-term trust building, but we have to have that end goal of this is ultimately where we're getting, so we're setting up that conversation correctly. And we need to have a timeline. I think you hit that nail on the head of it's easy to, kind of let things go, the work of the community go by the wayside because we're not having a timeline and urgency, and it's easy to be, to put things off till tomorrow, staff-wise, myself-wise, if we don't know that by next Thursday I need to accomplish X. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah,
Commissioner.
absolutely. No, that's helpful. I mean, if we were able to come to a conclusion about what we wanted to put out to the public in some kind of ballot measure, we would need to do a timeline back to when we need to accomplish getting information. So I think that is a task that we will need your help with, Judy.
Commissioner Farr.
You know, we have a history of telling people what we're going to give and then demonstrating that we did it through the audits that you mentioned, Carl. You know, it's the fact is, we say what we're going to give, and we had a specific currency, which is jail beds. So determining what is it that is salient to people that they want to have, and then promising them that we will deliver what it is that they want to have. Jail beds is very clear and understandable, and so I think, once again, we have the history of it. We are trustworthy. We can demonstrate that we're trustworthy and that we audit to demonstrate that we did what we said we were. When I say we, I mean you, of course, did what you said you were going to do.
Can I add one thing too? I feel like I should have said this earlier. I absolutely appreciate what the task force did in giving the numbers. But I think some of the conversation as we get community input and or polling or whatever is, the numbers that they ultimately gave us is kind of a fix to the system. But we need to be open to the fact that maybe the community is only comfortable with 50% of that. And we kind of need to have those numbers of what can 20 million do, and be prepared to say that's 5 deputy DAs with an estimated number of cases prosecuted, 10 resident deputies, and these are the communities. We need to maybe ferret out that as well of what is the community's comfort level. I think that there's a big chunk of our community who does have a comfort level of giving more, but not have the comfort level of giving that much more. So I think that should be part of that conversation as well. And frankly, from the sheriff's perspective, every new deputy DA and every new deputy working on the road is an impact to our community. So.
Thank you. I just want to say, because I feel like we're maybe closing in on direction to staff, which is what the outcome today is. But I just want to bring us back to the commissioners in particular, but also the advocacy of the sheriff and the DA, that there are some really critical fixes needed legislatively. That a lot of this hole that we are in is constructed. It's a structural hole that has been created through legislative and statutory, decisions that have been made that are not within our direct control. If they were, we wouldn't be here. But we do have influence and opportunity, and so not to muddy the waters, but that would be something, I'm mostly saying this as if we give direction to start working with some kind of consultant and messaging, is also to talk about what else are we working on, or maybe even to engage some of our legislative champions to help the community understand that the problem isn't just a Lane County problem, and it's not a we haven't been spending properly problem. It's that we've created a system with structural challenges, and some of those are going to have to be fixed at the state and in the meantime, because ultimately fixing at the state can also mean that the voters are going to spend more money, are going to pay more money for the services, right? So somehow that holistic message, but I'm also just reminding us we'll have a 27 long session, and that's where we're going to really have to pedal to the metal and be really focused. That's another way we can be focused and unified in our efforts legislatively on what we're advocating for with our Association of Counties and with our delegation and any other relationships we have in the State House to fix some of these funding formulas that are just exacerbating the problem.
All right, so what I'm hearing about thoughts for a roadmap, this is what I've garnered from the discussion, so please chime in if I've missed something. What I'm hearing is we are coalescing around hiring a consultant to engage the community by a certain time, similar to the courthouse project. Mr. Mokreisky says that's a solid year ahead of us, so I would suggest that we approach the consultants with a different timeline, more aggressive timeline. Second thing that we're hearing is what or how do we commit to holding the line this year while this year elapses or while this time elapses for this consultant to keep the public trust intact. So we need to make certain overtures, measures, or at least some news events that we're holding the line intact. And then also hearing suggestions for budgetary decisions by June. What are some of the things we're thinking about that we could start to educate the public in prior to losing Rural Patrol? And Mr. Mokreisky, if I recall, we have Rural Patrol funded through next June, but after that it's a little sketchy. Is that what I'm hearing is correct?
The enhanced Rural Patrol. So when you're referring to, and the sheriff can talk about this in greater detail, but there were two funds that we set up with a combination of reserves and additional secure rural schools funding, in which we invested it in, I hate to say propped up, but we invested in a small amount, but more nonetheless, patrol deputies in both East and West Lane County. There are two different scenarios for that. Both of those funds run out at the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2025. So that's if and when those run out and there's not a solution that's identified to fill that gap, there's still Rural Patrol that exists. It's not adequate, and the sheriff can certainly talk about that. But I just want to be clear about what is scheduled to run out of funds at the end of this fiscal year.
So
Yeah, just to add to that for a little bit more clarity, we had initially, because of one-time funding, 2 deputies for East Lane or McKinsey Highway, 2 deputies for West Lane, which was just everything west of Walton basically, and then an additional 8 deputies that brought our main office number to 30. So we are already operating with only 1 and 1 because of the funding didn't go as far as we expected. So we're talking about 10 positions of today's dollars that will mostly be evaporated by next year.
And so the reason I brought that up, or suggestions for budgetary decisions, was if we're committed to holding the line as what you're saying that your need is, what are some of the budgetary decisions that could happen in order for us to hold that line if push come to shove, worst case scenario? I think that's something we owe the public at least a weigh in, or at least a thought that we're thinking about that, or something like that.
Are you asking for something outside of the regular budget process for that?
No, I'm just suggesting what I need to go through this, so please bear with me. So what I'm suggesting is that, there has to be some what-if plan in place for the public to know that we're not going to lose 10 people come June 30th. The other thing I'm hearing too is that we're committed to outreach, and that's going to come, obviously the district attorney and the sheriff and the commissioners all chimed in on that. And so I think we should start planning some venues or talking about areas we need to meet. Commissioner Buck said her district's very large, and so there's probably going to be a couple or handful of places that we should commit to meeting in that large district that she oversees. So we need to start thinking about that and getting those in place, because as I'm thinking about us trying to do a county commissioner meeting in Oak Ridge, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and there's a lot of issues that we're facing that are making that very difficult. Metro, recording, public meetings laws, all of that. So
Just clarification, that's Blue River.
Or, I'm sorry, Blue River. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but there's a lot of things that have jumped. So do we engage all of a quorum of the county commissioners, or do we engage 2 to make that simpler? I mean, how do we do that? I think those are some of the things we need to answer. And then we need to, as we've said before in this talk, is we need to really develop and define our message. And I think that's part of our public information officer's help that she could do. What are we specifically asking the community for? Are we asking them for more money? Are we asking them for painful cuts? Are we asking them for both? Are we asking them for, out-of-the-box solutions? So we need to kind of identify and define our message as that all of us can coalesce around. And then the last 2 would be, could our public information office, prior to us engaging in a consultant and RFP, start putting out things on our Facebook pages, social media, our websites about some of the things that are coming up with QR codes that could have us more information, like i.e. explain more of the district attorney's problems and staffing and Measure 11 crimes that we're not unable to prosecute, and the sheriff's concern about losing can we start spoon feeding some of that information out from our website and our social media outlets prior to this effort that we get with our consultant? And then finally, we need to set a timeline for all that. That's what I'm hearing. Did I miss anything? Go ahead.
I just add one thing to that, and there's a lot there and a lot for us to work on. So in the beginning, I'd mentioned a cadence for us to meet on this. I don't know what we want to do on that, whether it's report backs or specific delving down into specific aspects of that. But while some of this work is happening in the administrative level, I would like to request that we have some kind of regular cadence on this topic specifically for our board, so that we are continually giving direction and feedback to the administration staff, so that we keep the energy going.
Good suggestion. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, so I'm wondering, but maybe this is where you're going. I wonder if to meet that and to satisfy what the chair just offered, asterisk, I want to ask you a question about it. What we're doing is giving direction to the administrator to come back, and we can name a time, in a month, whatever, with what is the suggested roadmap, given all you've heard, for how to move this forward with, thoughtfully, responsibly, strategically, and urgency. How do we do all this? Basically, give you a month to sort that out. And as I think the recommendation came to us, to establish or assign a structured team to move the work forward, that we give you the direction to do that. And then when we hear back what that is, we'll have a little more sort of point by point response to whether it hits all the pieces that the chair listed. The asterisk question for the chair is, when you talk about the budget and things that we will be facing come the new fiscal year, are you suggesting those are addressed outside of what is already the budgeting process that impacts next fiscal year? Or are you just calling them out?
I'm suggesting that we at least give the community a chance to look at the hard decision if it needs to be made. I mean, I'm not speaking from your perspective on process and budgeting and all that. I'm speaking just from a business perspective, that if we can't do this fully and we have to cut this, what is the thing that we have to cut? I mean, it has to be, in my mind, the citizens need to understand that this is sometimes a black and white hard thing. All right, if we're going to maintain by next June, if we're going to maintain those enhanced rural patrols, and we need to cut something from the budget, just axe it off, what does that look like? I mean, a hard decision. What Commissioner Farr said, that would be, what would you call it? The word escapes me, the out of the box or the hard decision. It's not going through the regular budgeting process, but this is a possibility. We couldn't meet this need if we don't commit ourselves to the public safety priority that we put out there. We could lose this. It needs to be a reality check, I guess what I'm trying to say. We need to communicate some of that messaging, even if what we have to do is go through the regular budgetary process to make that happen.
The term I used was outrageous.
Outrageous, thank you. That was the term I was looking for.
So I think,
Kind of a wake-up call is what I was saying.
Oh, I was
Vice
just gonna
Chair.
say the sheriff kind of hit on that. I mean, asking the public that this is what it looks like if the answer is no.
Right.
Here we go.
so I'd like to try to just get a little clearer on what because there's been a lot of talk about sort of some individual things. I'm hearing community outreach and maybe some conversations around budget and prioritization in advance of the budget cycle. I want to try to and then you asked about timeline, and I'm hesitant. I mean, I threw it over a year, but it would be helpful if y'all could articulate the end goal, or maybe you don't know what the end goal is yet, because that will inform whatever process we go through. For example, and this is what I'm saying, you may not have the answer to this question yet, but if the end goal is cutting $20 million from the budget to fund additional services in public safety, that will require a certain process and conversation and timeline. If the end goal is, to pursue a new revenue, then the question is the board going to implement that, or would it go to the voters, and what does that look like? So trying to just get it, and I think that also, that informs not only the timeline, but the type of meetings that we have in the community. What I'm hearing is a desire to do that outreach, to start doing some outreach and communication in your various districts and communities, to talk about, along with the sheriff and the DA, potentially. So we definitely can map that out. What would it look like to, to set up various, we can look at what we've done in the past, what we did with the Parks levy, what we did with the courthouse bond, and what we've done with the public safety levy. Kind of lay out what would a community engagement, a first round of community engagement look like. I'm kind of hearing that. And then I'm hearing a discussion around prioritization, sort of budget, which I think is pretty timely, given the state and federal impacts that we're going to be, this isn't the only cutting scenario that we're going to be in the middle of. And so that's why I wanted to start off with a little bit of the lay of the landscape that you're dealing with. I mean, we all wish the only problem we were trying to solve was funding, better funding patrol and prosecution. Unfortunately, there's a cascade of funding cuts that are coming our way. And so the cuts are not going to look pretty. And y'all aren't going to be happy with them. We all aren't going to be happy with them, and the community's not going to be happy with them. So I think I do think that conversation is going to be an important one to lay out. Well, here are the things that are already on the table in terms of impacts from cuts from the state and federal government. And then here are things that are under your discretion that you could cut and move to another area. I think we probably could have that conversation, begin to have that conversation in the next 3 months or so before the end of the calendar year, because I really would like some direction as we head into next year's fiscal year. So anyways, that was a lot, but I just want to get clear, is that the expectation, community outreach and budget prioritization?
I think that has to be, I mean, for this particular subject specifically, I think what success would look like is we've done a robust community engagement about the items listed as potential revenue resources delivered in this report. That informs us as to what, if anything, we want to place on the ballot in front of voters. And that timeline is spelled out. For me, that would be success for this issue. I think along those lines, we're going to be talking about this budget situation that is bigger than just this particular subject. And that's going to probably consume a good portion of our time, because I've not been in a situation in my 7 years where we are guaranteed to be confronted with some severe budget cuts that we see coming down. And I know, Commissioner Farr, you've been here longer and you may have seen more than I, but it's...
Starting with measure 5.
Yeah. But I think that is going to impact resident sentiment for this issue. I don't want to conflate the two, but at the same time, we have to be realistic about the impact.
Mr. Mokreski, when you said the end goal, did you mean the end goal as far as the end-to-end goal, or are you talking the end goal as we're going to be facing in June? Because I have a direction that I may want to head depending on your answer.
Well, I think the June conversation, which you're relating to the pieces of enhanced patrol that were enacted in 2022. So that additional funding that was made of, how much was that, $12 million total?
That seems like the right number.
Roughly $12 million that was allocated by the board in 2022 for additional patrol services is scheduled to run out at the end of this fiscal year. So yes, we'll need some direction on that. I was thinking about that as really direction that the board needs to provide in terms of if your expectation is a proposed budget that includes funding for that enhanced patrol, and where you think that a good place to look for, that would be good to have. I wasn't unless you direct otherwise, thinking that we were going to do outreach related to that. If you'd like to do outreach related to that, we can. There's really two different issues I think we're talking about. And the task force I don't think really wrestled with the question of the enhanced patrol that was enacted in 2022. They really focused on fixing the bigger, which is the roughly $22 million.
I would just like to say for clarification purposes, when we said the $12 million mark, that was for multi-years.
Yeah.
So that would not be we have to find $12 million in the next budget.
Thank you for
Yes.
clarifying.
We took $12 million essentially that was cobbled together from one-time secure rural schools and general fund reserves that had been allocated actually for the courthouse, I think for the courthouse construction. We put it into a one-time pot of money and we said, this is basically our internal levy. And we'll spend this $12 million over 5 years from 2022 to 2027. But as the sheriff said, it has not lasted. It might have actually been 2021. So that's scheduled to run out. So two different issues, and I guess what I was hearing the board say is you'd like to see community engagement efforts initially around the bigger, longer term enhancement to public safety, which is this roughly $22+ million per year in additional funding.
Well, I just want to come back, full circle back to your question, what's the end goal? And I'd really love if each commissioner would weigh in just to see what their end goal is in a brief statement. I think that would help direct the staff to what we're going to do next. Heading back to the DA and the sheriff's desire for a clear roadmap ahead. And if I could just answer that question for you, for me, the end goal would be this, is to maintain public safety without any sacrifices, what we have right now, period. And do what it takes to put public safety first and to give the information as best it can be received. That means hiring a consultant or whatever. That would be the second thing I would do. And recapture trust from the voters and to ensure then that we're using every nickel to our highest priorities. That means we need to educate, we need to website, social media, whatever it takes to get the story out, to tell the story. That would be my end goal from today. So maintain public safety without any sacrifices. Do what it takes to put public safety first and give the information as best it can to our constituents so that can be received, and to recapture the trust by communicating where we're at exactly so they can see and understand. Those would be my three. Does anybody else want to join in? Yes, Commissioner Farr, please.
Actually, I didn't have my hand raised.
So you were like drum beating it? Well, I heard the Bee Gees
Drum roll.
over there, so I thought I'd call.
I just want to be clear, so that doesn't include new rev, so there's not, in terms of your perspective, we're looking at existing revenue for trying to maintain existing public safety, not new revenue.
Right, going back to the quote on the slide on there, we have no new revenue, only changes in how existing dollars circulate, yes.
But you don't want to pursue the report, the
No.
suggestions of the report?
No, that's part of that. I hope I'm not confusing it. The second part was do what it takes to put public safety first and give the information as best it can be received. That includes our usual outlets that we can hire a consultant to get that information out, engage people throughout the districts, all of that topics that we had, that was kind of under all one thought.
Okay, we don't go backwards. Sheriff, you said we cannot afford to go backwards. I cannot lose any more staff. So my goal is we don't go backwards from where we are right now, and that's not going to be easy. Just not going backwards. The second is that we engage the public in an information campaign that brings people up to the level of understanding the situation that we're in, regarding the DA staff, regarding prosecution, regarding patrol, and regarding corrections, and that we identify a means to permanently fund public safety. There's a lot that goes into that, of course. I think we have two slides, Judy, that you provided. One is focus solutions that give us four options, including a multi-layered approach. I think how do we engage a multi-layered approach to the permanent funding solution, and how do we engage the conditions for moving forward? How do we make certain that we demonstrate fiscal responsibility and prioritization before we can even begin to ask for the trust of the people?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah, I'll say won't go backwards, but I mean from last year when we had 2 rural deputies, East Lane and 2 West Lane. 1 deputy for all of East Lane and one for West Lane just isn't enough. They're out there by themselves every day, and that's, I don't agree with that. So, yeah, start there. And I would like to see, I really liked what the sheriff said about finding out where the constituents are, what they are comfortable with. Say, fully funded is our top notch. What do they think is adequate, and see what that number is, and we can kind of work off that. That would be, I think that would be valuable information for us to really know. And I haven't said thanks to the Public Safety Funding Task Force yet. Thank you very much. That was a lot of hard work, and the work is just beginning, but thanks for sticking around and helping us through this process.
Remind me what your question is, Chair?
End goal.
For end goal for today's meeting?
The end goal for a roadmap. Mr. Mokraski put out,
End goal for a road.
for a roadmap forward, I put out some steps forward that I think that we should take, and just, what is your end goal with this? I mean, and I'd say from June and on.
Well, and to that, what the constituents would be comfortable with, is that a payroll tax, or, I mean, what would they be most likely to accept?
I can take a shot. My end goal would be as fully funded a public safety system as the community will support. That's my end goal. How we get there, what order we do things, what everybody's different role is, how we message it, TBD. And the way we determine is, I think, by what we've said, directing the administrator to pull a team together to take all of what we brought in today and start mapping out, scenarioing some timelines. And I think we do need, our staff is already stretched thin. We need someone who is expert and solely focused on and being paid specifically to do some of that temperature read in the community about what's the appetite, what's people's understanding. I think this is also an incredible opportunity to educate the community more broadly about the constraints the county faces in a number of areas, because the cuts that we are going to be facing because of the reduction and clawback of state and federal funds is going to go well beyond the public safety system. And so yeah, I think the strongest public safety system the community will support is my end goal, and then there's lots of work to do to get their support.
So I'm hearing three things. One, and correct me if we're missing anything. One is a budget prioritization conversation with this idea of maintaining what we have, right? So there is this broader budget conversation, but particularly prioritization around initially in advance of the budget process, that where the board can weigh in on and provide some direction on what your priorities are and how you might seek to achieve maintaining what we have in the environment that exists. That's one. Two is a robust community engagement effort that would be multifaceted and countywide in some way. And this would be initially prior to any sort of maybe community ask, but this is to talk about the challenges we face, particularly in the areas of prosecution and rural patrol. And then three, I did hear, and I think we're going to need to do a community survey effort. Like all of that, all three of those things need to happen within the next year, right? And I think we probably could get a good chunk of it done in the next 6 months. I think that's
I like the sound of that.
feasible. I think that's feasible in order to figure out sort of what next steps may look like. The most the most time-consuming piece of that process is the community engagement.
Well, I'm wondering, because of that, is why aren't we asking a two-pronged approach? Ask them, what are their priorities and what's the temperature on level of support, as Commissioner Soniga said. I mean, to make that, make that one and then another just adds more time. I mean, at some point, we're gonna have to rip the Band-Aid off and find it.
I think my suggestion would be, if you're gonna do that, which I don't think is a bad suggestion, we do some voter surveying first. Because otherwise, it's sort of like, you know, you're shooting in the dark in terms of what a proposal looks like. You really want to get a sense of what is voter sentiment. The sheriff talked about when we initially did polling for the 2013 levy. The community said this, and then we went out and did all that effort. So I think if that's the approach that you'd like to go out and start framing the conversation around a potential new revenue source, then I think we should do some of that survey work up front. Otherwise, you don't know. Otherwise, you don't really have. You don't have any information about where voter sentiment is.
Yeah, go ahead, you're first.
My concern of doing polling now is that this information in this report is largely not gone out to the public. And they'll have no idea, you know, all this information that would could potentially change people's minds. So I think without doing the work on the ground first, we're not getting the information back that is actually going to be helpful.
I agree with that, Heather. You know, that polling people based on what they know now is going to be different based upon what the public information campaign gives to them. It's almost like push polling in a if you knew this, what would you think?
Right.
Well, you don't want to resort to push polling because that's despicable. But what we want to do is inform people about the current situation in terms that they understand, and then ask them how they feel about the current situation. What were your priorities based upon the reality of it? And the most recent poll that I'm looking at is the 2023 one, where 2/3 of the people thought we were adequately funded, or didn't know, and a large chunk, a third of people didn't even know. So we're polling people who don't know at this point in time, or polling people who really have a incorrect view, not incorrect, that's not the right word, but just an incomplete view of what the public safety system actually looks like. Because it's not affected them. If it's not affected you, then you've not tasted it yet. You don't want you to taste it.
I think, so what I'm hearing too is some baseline education, community information education campaign and awareness. So I guess I would modify my goal to say the strongest public safety system from an informed public will support, and that includes being informed about the hydraulics and how large the system is, because even if we go out and ask for funding for a piece of the system, they need to understand how that impacts the whole system. This may be an imperfect analogy, I'm gonna sort of try to make it up on the fly. It's like the difference between just asking the community, do you want to go get something to eat? Well, some people will not be hungry, so they'll say no, but they're going to be hungry later. Or do you want to go to a Thai restaurant? Before you actually hand them a menu, right? Then they all know, only the people who are hungry are going to say yes. Those people are going to go to a certain restaurant where there's some parameters, so they understand what some of the options might be, and then you're going to give them the really specific options. So like that order of operations, we have to sort of apply here. And so I think, again, it still leads to, I like the 6 months of getting us some kind of timeline, this step, that step, the other. And I would just add, in terms of specific sort of tactics within that, is when, where, and how best each commissioner can engage with that process. Because you can tell you've got 5 of us, and then you've got this task force who are ready, again, to be those ambassadors and help set that groundwork and be part of that sharing information. So getting that up and running sooner is, my guess, is going to help satisfy a lot of our sense of urgency. So we have something that we can take out there that's just going to help build on ultimate success. And as I said, it's just only going to help further people understanding the constraints that county government's facing. So when they hear about these other challenges that are coming our way outside of the public safety system, they'll have some context for it.
Sheriffs, help us land the plane.
Well, I want to start by saying thank you to the task force. I think they gave us, a good starting path to go. I sincerely actually want to thank the board for continuing this conversation. There has been 5 task force up to this point, and clearly this is important to this board. And so thank you for continuing this conversation. It would have been easy to say, oh, that seems challenging. Okay, next item. So thank you for having this conversation today. And I'd like to add to Commissioner Buck's sentiment about having a plan for at least check-ins and cadence to keep our foot on the pedal on this, whether that is just to figure out what we're not going to do or to figure out where we need to focus our efforts. So I would really like to encourage that conversation to continue as I understand the administrator has been given kind of his tasks to accomplish over this next year, but I would like us to have a conversation about when are we going to have these check-ins? When are we going to have this conversation next? What have we accomplished? So.
Mr. Mokarski, might that be part of your announcements in that? We could do that like on a monthly thing, maybe have the sheriff or the DA as part of that, so it's a more informal kinds of things, or do we need a board order for that? Board schedule
I mean, that
for
can be part of it. We can add a bullet to the three that I said, add a fourth. And I mean, I think that this was part of what we were planning to do, was set up it'd be helpful to know if you'd like a monthly work session or a every time the board is up work session. I would suggest that we try to do at least a monthly.
That's
Given-
what I would like.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so.
You got head nods on that.
Yeah.
So we can add 4 items, and one of them is to do a monthly work session. My suggestion is we do Wednesday mornings, so please hold your Wednesday mornings open, because that will make it easier for the Tuesdays to just be able to do the business you need to do, and then have your Wednesdays once a month. You'll be
Progress
here.
report, yeah.
And, yeah, and then we'll have a dedicated time to provide updates and dive into, we're gonna need some, we will need some sort of direction or expectation on what you'd like to talk about at each of those, because there's a tendency that we could have a scheduled work session. We don't necessarily have, 2 hours of an update. So it'd be helpful to know if there are particular topics or issues you'd like to dive into at each of those.
It'd be cool if we could have a dashboard of sorts that we're employing in other efforts in human services, in particular in health. A dashboard that gives you information not just every month, but you can see where we are at this moment in time as things happen. And I'm not talking about a huge effort into a dashboard the way we've done, but just these are the points, and this is the progress along the points along the way, because it's important that we maintain the cadence. I mean, it's monthly is not quite HUT 2, 3, 4, which is what I consider cadence. Every step is a step toward the goal.
Yeah, and I think the next one should be pretty easy in terms of content. We can report back to you on the 4 areas. We're kind of getting into process a little bit, and the question about actual decisions, either on expenditure reductions or new revenue, we're not quite there yet, but we're teeing up the conversation for that, it seems.
Commissioner Trigger, some final
Thank you.
thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I agree. I think the monthly is right, but it's always easy to take something off an agenda and move it into announcements or just a briefer item of just progress report. There's no need to actually have a whole work session, but here's what we're doing. I would hope we could get the first one in a month, but recognize if you need a little more time for the first one to lay some groundwork, that the first one will be coming back with this sort of timeline of here's what you expect will happen in the monthly reports. Then we'll hit into late in the year and might stretch out because of holiday schedules. But as long as we see steady, regular, forward progress and momentum, I'm happy. I always do hold my Wednesday mornings until I see the agenda come out, to just know that there's that placeholder. But I don't want staff to make work just to present to us. So knowing what the steps are and what the progress towards them is what's important to me more than anything else.
Okay.
If I may just add one quick thing for the committee, for the task force. One thing that you did really early on is you narrowed it down. What does public safety mean, and what is it that we're talking about? And you narrowed it down to roll patrol, district attorney's office, and adult corrections. Not a lot of the peripheral things that really are absolutely part of public safety, but what you talked about were very specifically these 3 areas. And I think you've helped us all to focus on that, and I think we all agree with that approach. Well done.
All right, well, thank you all for your 2 hours of time commitment and your comments and the work we've done. We got lots of work ahead of us, and thank you so much for being engaged and professional about this. We're going to transition just a little bit. We do have some items left over from yesterday's agenda that we did. Sorry, everybody's kind of loading their computers and folding their stuff. Sorry, we have some commissioners' business to take care of. We have a few items on here. Our 9A commissioners' business is a brief discussion. We have a vacancy on the Lane Workforce Partnership Board, and I would like to have some suggestions for a replacement, so I'll put that out to the board. Typically, we have committees that we suggest who wants to be on those in January, and this is a vacancy that we have now. So, Commissioner Trigger.
Great, thank you, Chair. I know Commissioner Buck was on that committee prior. I don't know if she's interested in jumping back in, but it would be fairly seamless since she's been on it before, knows the work, knows the dynamics, has a good working relationship with the executive director. I also know has a very full plate, but I would be happy to support appointing Commissioner Buck to the Lane Workforce Partnership Board if she is interested and the rest of the board supports that.
I'm happy to do that unless somebody else is wildly excited to want to be on it. Yeah, having ran a business for 15 years, it's in my wheelhouse. So, but if somebody else is interested, I'm totally open to that as well.
I fully support Commissioner Buck. I think she'd be great.
My head's nodding automatically.
glad to have you
Commissioner
back.
Farr?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Commissioner Buck, for taking that on. Appreciate that very much. All right, well, that was easy. Let's move to, we have some combination of announcements and remonstrance from the meeting that we had yesterday and even today, or some committee reports. So I'll kind of lump all those together. If you have announcements or comments from the meeting or committee reports, please, who wants to go first? Vice Chair, go on.
So we were at a groundbreaking earlier this week in Florence. They're doing something really cool. It's 8 blocks of affordable housing with mixed between private funding. Senator Anderson, Representative Wright got some money from the state, and the city is donated a couple, or city is involved with a couple of blocks, and they've done all the street and sidewalk infrastructure, and in August they're going to have 36 units open, and when it's all built out it should be around 137 units open. And this one's really cool because integrated into it is a 50 child care center, so it'll all be wrapped up into one, which I know is something we're all very passionate about. So just a really cool project, and it was a great groundbreaking ceremony. I mean, it was very, very well attended, and Florence is super excited about it. And I was going to talk to you about that this afternoon before you see Erin, and tell her congratulations, because she's done a fantastic job of wrangling all this and helping put it together. So it's really exciting, fun stuff.
Which agency did that?
Which agency?
No, it's the development.
Well, actually, it's just his name's Lane, and it's kind of his brainchild, and this is his the third one that him and his wife do it. They go out and they help coordinate this stuff, and of course he was the champion of the whole thing. Yeah, so it's not a one of the Homes for Good type agencies or something like that, if you're asking. No.
Private party, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, private party, and the state funding. The state funding went in for because it was hard to. It wasn't attractive for anybody else to build on, so that's where the state funding came in. Was they put the infrastructure in, the city did the roads and sidewalks, which made it more attractive for somebody to build on. So really cool stuff.
Hence the formula for development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Great. Mr. Farr?
Yeah, one thing, just a comment on something I said yesterday. I talked about the Lane County Historical Museum, and I maybe painted the picture that everything was moldy over there, because that's not the case. I mean, if you see the presentations, the displays at the museum are wonderful. We don't get to display as much as we'd like to. We don't get the turnover of display that they would love to present to us, but the displays are wonderful. What is moldy is the place we're storing the collection, and it's not a very wonderful place to store a collection of stuff that if it goes away, it's never coming back. So those are the points that I really wanted to make. And Robin Myers called my attention to it yesterday. And thank you, Robin, for doing that, because I really didn't want to imply that the stuff we're showing is moldy. It's not. It's wonderful. So. Second thing I'd like to talk about is 3 committees that I am on: Mental Health Advisory, which is also our local drug and alcohol policy, and Developmental Disabilities Committee. That's one committee, the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and then the Multi-Agency Collaborative. All 3 have similar agendas or overlapping agendas, and we're making efforts. All of the leadership in all of those 3 committees making efforts to knit the agendas of those 3 committees to do 2 things: to make certain that we're putting all of our efforts in the same direction, and also to help staff that staffs each of those 3 committees, the overlapping staff, to make it easier for them to prepare the agendas. So a multi-pronged approach to more productive outcomes from, even more productive outcomes from those 3 committees. You'll see more and hear more on that. Brittany DeLisi is a part of the staff, James Zuhl, the staff members who are really working together to make that happen. Look for more progress in that area for the future. That's all I have.
Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. To that, I'm looking forward to the next Human Services Commission, which I think we're going to be hearing the Poverty and Homelessness Board's strategic plan, so that the HSC, which is the allocation and funding arm to support the strategies the PHB develops, will be more integrated with that moving forward. Even more, I should say. I don't want to imply we haven't always been. And then I just want to say we're down next week because it's Labor Day. So I wanted to just in particular thank workers everywhere, but particularly those folks who choose to work here at Lane County, and to thank the labor movement for all their work that they do over the decades to keep workers safe and improve our community with their professionalism and their dedication. Happy Labor Day.
Commissioner Buck, anything?
Not today.
Awesome. One more? Vice Chair.
Yeah, well, we kind of hit on it earlier. So our PSCC budget committee met with the state, and I didn't have my notes pulled up, but it was really interesting to look at their numbers and what they considered high risk versus what Lane County was. And it was, when I talked about it earlier about the passion that our parole and probation has, was the state runs a different parameter. Oh, Greg's back, good. The state runs a different parameter for what they considered high risk. And it's a different table than what Lane County uses. And we were trying to, it was a much simpler table, but in Lane County, our numbers were shown to be different than what the state numbers were. And I had a bunch of questions here that Greg, after the state left, because I not fully understanding how the process worked, that Greg was gracious enough to answer. And, part of that, I didn't really understand how the funding with their numbers versus our numbers was going to change the PSCC, and it didn't sound like it was, but we were trying to be on the same page, so all of our funding numbers looked correct. I mean, and then it went to our sheriff's office, where we had different jail beds set aside for different things than what they considered qualified for that funding.
Yeah. We'll have a full presentation for you on September 9th, and I understand that you might not be available for that.
That's right. I'll make sure to watch the recording if I'm not here.
And we will get into that, but it really is troubling that we're being asked to trust the state on basically a 3-question assessment for determining risk of clients under supervision, as opposed to the LSCMI, which we know is data-led, verified as effective, and it's troubling to receive counsel to look the other way.
Yeah, right. Half of the people that we have on involved in parole and probation, they were just saying, don't keep an eye on them, they'll be fine. And
Yeah.
And we
consider-
disagreed.
You consider them high risk because of the LSCMI. Go ahead and supervise them as low risk based on the public safety checklist.
LSCMI.
I knew you were going to ask that as soon as I
Can't get away
said
with that one, sorry.
Local,
It's,
I wrote it down because I had the same question.
I will get that to you.
Okay,
tonight.
sounds
Is it like the
good.
criminality index,
Yeah,
something,
it's-
something?
Yeah, it's gotta be something, measurable index or something, yeah, okay, well, good deal. All right, anything else?
Are they,
Too many
so are
notes.
they purposely reducing their risk index in order to justify the lower,
Application.
probation oversight level?
No, they are saying that we are choosing to over supervise these individuals, that we should accept the public safety checklist that is given at the start of their sentencing, as they go into the criminal justice system. We should simply use that as the tool and supervise to that index, as opposed for us to do a second testing once they come to us and we are actually trying to understand who we have in front of us. So don't ask
Yeah, don't ask these questions.
these questions. Simply supervise them based on a 3-question survey.
I think I would probably still define it as I did.
Yeah, well, and the truth of the matter is, they were very clear that they too were disappointed that we are legally required to provide every 4 years a time survey to understand what it actually costs to supervise the individual. That information goes to the state, so they know what it costs to supervise every individual, and that data is pretty much just ignored, and it's funded at a much lesser level, so they know that they're offloading those costs onto each and every county.
And the they in this case is the DOJ, is the,
It's the state legislature.
just did the ledge, okay.
Yeah, yeah. The Department of Corrections is very clear that they wanted and argued for the larger number, that they argued first and foremost for the time study. Second to that, the governor's funding level, which was considerably higher than, and the legislature came in at literally the minimum amount of dollars that would not trigger counties being able to hand this function back to the state.
But the agency is the DOC.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
Department of Corrections.
I have long believed that we need to, I think, well, it wasn't an oversight, but I've long believed we needed to roll the time cost study statute into the baseline formula. Otherwise, this will be like many state programs where the state slowly and surely just walks away from it, as they have done with district attorney services, as they've done with other law. It's just another pattern here. And I don't know if the Association of Oregon Counties would have a desire to push legislation formally folding the time cost study into the baseline, but fundamentally that's what needs to happen. And for what it's worth, I've crafted that legislation over and over and over again.
Resident expert, sounds like we have a plan forward, eh, Vice Chair?
We're very lucky to have the people on our staff that we do.
Amen.
Sure.
Yep. All right, got it as a brief announcement. Springfield Block Party is week from Friday, September 5th. The ribbon cutting is at 4 p.m. It's going to be a major event, goes till 10 p.m. Friday night. Main Street, which is Highway 126, will be closed for 7 blocks. That's a major coup. So there's lots of booths, and Selco's been the major sponsor of it. It has grown to Eugene celebration sort of size event. So you need to go to that. Check out what downtown Springfield's like. September 5th, 4 o'clock. All right, we're on to our future board assignments. Anything cooking for any of the commissioners that wish to task our great staff to do?
I think their plates are full enough.
They are full enough, but however, I've got a couple myself. I do want to bring this out. I understand, maybe I'm talking out of turn, so Commissioner Buck, forgive me if I am. I understand that you or maybe Commissioner Trigger might be on some sort of river committee of some sort, state level, so that's just a rumor I heard. But my ask is this, there's a property in Harrisburg where it borders both Lane County and Lynn County that the river has changed direction and it's eroding their property to the point where they've lost 30 feet of property in the last year. And it's threatening, it used to be the old Safari Wildlife, or the Safari Motor Coach Company property. It's now Life Bible Church. And it's eroded that property to the point where their swimming pool deck has fallen into the river. And a large oak tree has fallen into the river last week. And so they're obviously meeting with a very a large array of Department of State Lands and DEQ and the Army Corps of Engineers. And I'm just wondering if there's any influence our board has on like a regional rivers council or anything that we could use to help stir that timeline a little more quickly so that this winter they don't, I mean, it's a possibility that one building could be condemned. So they're at that level.
I'll just say that I'm not on a river committee. We all have watershed liaison assignments. Whoever is in that watershed might be the appropriate person. It's not mine that I'm aware
They're
of.
at the table talking now. I was just wondering if any one of us was on a committee or staff knew, or if we could help push that along in any way. I could be just asking for the moon here, I don't know.
That's in Lynn County?
It's in Lynn County, but it borders Lynn and Lane. I mean, we're right on the other side of the river from that.
So it's part of the river.
So it's part of our river.
I'm on the Siuslaw watershed.
Maybe something you need to get back to me on.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have an answer on the ready
Some
answer.
information, I can look into it.
Okay. The other question I have is I've looked at tape and it seems like every fall for the last 3 years we've had a presentation about moving the transfer site. Last presentation we had, I believe, was in '23, and there was money allotted to moving the transfer site, $30,000 to looking into some of the solid points moving forward, and I don't know if we've heard back yet, so I'd like to know if we could hear back from that.
From a study that was done?
Yeah, supposedly there was a $30,000 consultant or research or something that was going to find a pathway of next steps of moving the transfer site, and that hasn't come back to the board yet, so I want to see if that can come back to the board.
Seeing the talking with Glenwood.
Glenwood Transfer Station, yeah,
I mean, we had a presentation,
in '23.
several years ago, and my understanding from that one was there was like a preliminary assessment of the residents to see whether they like that site or some other site. It wasn't statistically significant, but that the results was that they really liked that site. But after that, I'm not sure that we gave them any more specific direction. Honestly, I don't know that we have any funding to move the site anyway.
We know that there's commercial interest in that site that's been on the table, that's currently on the table, so I think it's time we have an update.
And I'm fine with an update.
So let's see, head nods on that, that's good? Okay, great, thank you. And then one last thing, just kind of a poke, it may not even be a board assignment, just a question I have. I was out at the Posse event, both Commissioner Buck and I were out there and was talking to Ellen Murphy about just some of the needs and the development ideas on that end of the Howard Buford recreational area, and I'm just wondering if there's any thought to having Ellen Murphy and the Posse coming back in for some of their concerns to make a presentation to the board and some of their ideas of revenue generating ideas that would be on that property. Is that something that the board's open to hearing?
I think I'd like to flesh that out a little because they're not the only partner in that discussion. There are several other entities that have been having a discussion regarding that site. I honestly don't know that that reaches the board level specifically, but it sounds like things have been worked out, and there's an overall plan regarding the park, and I wouldn't mind an update on where we are with that particular plan. but I'm not sure if that's what you're thinking of, or if you're thinking of something
Well,
else.
he'd mentioned there was some struggles going on there and some ideas to generate revenue for the posse organization and that. And I thought, if it sounded like some good ideas and some good concerns that we should look at in light of the whole master plan of HBRA. And I thought we should at least have a conversation about it. I contacted Brett Henry from our Parks Division, and there's been some discussions ongoing, and it's something that's not immediate, but I think maybe in the near future, so that we would be a discussion that would be worth having.
You would want it to be around HBRA and the Arboretum and Mount Pisgah generally, or
that end.
specific to
Just that end to the-
because there have been conversations between those entities.
Right. I mean, there's some
The North Bottomland.
North Bottomland, there's some
Specifically.
trail questions and maintenance and maybe some rubs with the McKenzie Watershed Council and those kinds of things that still need to be ironed out and worked out. And so I think maybe there's, some discussion that needs to be had so we can make that park the better best it can. And I think a great idea for some revenue generating, but I'm not at liberty to let that out of the bag yet.
Might be wise to seek some counsel here regarding pending litigation.
Oh,
Maybe not now, I'm just,
Yeah.
And I would just want to understand more what the connection to the board and our opportunity is,
Yeah.
that
I guess I
why we would
needed
be hearing.
to hear a little
Yeah.
more. I prefer not to get into litigation, of course, in public meetings.
Well, there's more to it than I thought, so, okay, just putting it out there. All right, so transfer site is one of them, and any influence, if you can think even after this meeting about that flood condition going on and that erosion of the bank, I would certainly appreciate it. All right, Mr. Mokrice, any review to the assignments then?
just have that one, the transfer station study. I reached out to Mr. Hurley, so I'll get an update from him and give the board an update under my announcements in the next meeting. And if there is, an update or presentation that we can provide that's new information, we'll certainly do that. Or are you asking specifically for an update, a presentation on
Yes.
the transfer station?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do
Yes,
a
sir.
discussion and update on transfer station.
All right, great. Is there any other business for the good of the order?
Chair Lovell,
Yes, sir.
if I may, LSCMI, level of service case management inventory.
Level of service case management inventory.
Rolls
Wow.
off the tongue.
Yeah, it's easy to remember.
I'll make sure that's my first tattoo.
Yeah, you tattoo. All right, thanks for getting back.
Dedication,
Appreciate
Greg.
that, Greg, very much. Thank you for your time this Wednesday. Appreciate all the input that we had today. Thanks for your thoughtfulness, commissioners. Good serving with you today. This regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners is now adjourned.